Once again, we're extremely pleased to welcome Scott and Elizabeth this morning to share their insights and their perspectives with us. Most of you have heard me introduce Scott before, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. He's an accomplished speaker, a trainer, a consultant, and committed to helping individuals and organizations specifically unleash their leadership potential. He's the author of a bunch of books, and he's got a new one coming out shortly. But most importantly, he is a friend of West Hill. And joining Scott this morning is his wife, Elizabeth. She has been here with Scott before, but this will be her first opportunity to share her gifts with us. A little bit about Elizabeth, because I haven't introduced her before, but Elizabeth is the Corporate Director of Learning and Development with CBC Radio Canada. And she's responsible for talent development and talent management and organizational development across the enterprise. Elizabeth has owned a highly successful consulting firm that provided coaching and facilitation, training and consulting. She's taught at McMaster School of Continuing Studies and is a guest lecturer at the University of Waterloo. She's a certified professional coach with the International Coaching Federation, is one of a handful of fully trained Thanadoulas, a new word for me, working with people and families at end of life. And most recently, she completed a certificate in plant-based nutrition through Cornell University. So I ask you to extend a very warm round of applause for Scott and for Elizabeth as they join us this morning.
Well, it's really great to be back once more, and it's really cool to be sharing the front of the church with Elizabeth and have an opportunity together to talk a little bit about our relationship. Now, if you're looking for a model of how to be in relationship, this is not it. I think we have a great relationship, but we're not here today to present ourselves as, be like us. What we are here today is to share a tool or a framework that we have found really helpful in our relationship. We've only known each other for just over 3 years, have been married now for about 1 year and 3 months or so. We... What? 4 months? See what I mean? We're not the model for... but we have used a framework that actually comes out of our professional background. We both obviously work in organizational development and personal development, leadership development, all that kind of stuff. And this was a framework that we came across that started in the workplace, but we have applied to ourselves. And we want to offer it to you as something for you to consider. We all long for genuine connection. And the readings that you've heard this morning certainly speak to the importance of that, but also the challenge of that. We long for community. We long for close friendships and close relationships in our family and with our partners, but it's tough. We all know that as well. It is hard to have deep, lasting connections that flourish over time and provide the kind of nurture and life that we are seeking. So we have a tool that we use. It's called Simple Rules. And we want to talk about that today for a few minutes. Now, if you were here the last time I spoke, it was a marathon. Today, it'll be much briefer, so some of you are going, oh God, he's back and he talks for like an hour and stuff, so not to worry today. Simple Rules. We have a home in Wellington in Prince Edward County, and we are privileged to live right on the flight path of a lot of geese. And so we frequently are privileged to watch their flying V formation over our home and listen to their sounds. And often, we'll hear them and we'll run out of doors and look up and we see this flying V formation going once again. How do geese know how to do that? Or consider this phenomena. How do fish know how to do that? It's pretty remarkable. The patterns and the unity that you see in the natural world. How do they do that? Well, scientists have explored how they do that for several years, and a concept has emerged that's called emergence. Rather than me be the scientist, let me show you a bit of a documentary that was done on PBS.
It is mysterious how a flock of birds or a school of fish move as one with such grace and coordination, as if there's one brain behind them all, or an invisible force at play. An explanation may be found in emergence, a science that tries to explain complex patterns and behavior that arise in the world around us. Some believe emergence may reveal more than just how birds and fish do this, but how we think and how life itself began in the first place. But while many of science's mysteries long have been explained, gravity we predict with Newton's laws of gravity, and magnetism through Maxwell's laws. Things like this remain largely unpredictable.
Emergence, when you first see it, seems mysterious. But that, if I go back and read the papers at the time of Maxwell, electromagnetism seemed very mysterious too.
Let's start with what we do know about emergence. It's an order we might not expect to see. Usually where there is order, there's a leader, a conductor of an orchestra, or a general with his army.
Orders come from the top
And they go down.
Top-down order where you have one brain controlling the functions of the entire group.
A leader at the top and many who follow down below. It's just how we expect things to be. So, who's in charge here? Him? No. Him?
There's no conductor, there's no general, there's no leader, there's no director that's telling every fish where to go.
Well then, what about these birds?
There's no one in charge of the birds either.
So if the order isn't coming from the top down, where is it coming from?
The organization comes from the bottom up. So at the bottom we have these things that are following their own sets of rules, often fairly simple. One is to go in the same direction as the other guys. Another is don't get too close, but don't get too far from my neighbors.
And perhaps the most important rule, if someone's coming after you, get out of the way. From these simple rules, very complex patterns can spontaneously emerge.
What we see is a pattern emerging from the bottom up.
And so it came to be called emergent complexity, or simply emergence. Of course, different creatures have different rules, but whether ants, or wildebeest, or this slime mold,
The behavior emerges from the actions that are controlled by the rules. And behavior of the whole is more than the sum of the parts. And that's the flag for emergence.
and you might not have noticed it, but it's not just seen in animals.
Similarly with crowds, there are no leaders within certain types of crowds.
Crowds of people? We do it just like the birds and fish?
Movement is happening at a very much subconscious level. You don't think about how to walk, you just do it.
Keith Still studies the emergent complexity in crowds. He says these people crossing the street have no idea they're part of a larger pattern.
As if they're following each other in long conga lines. What happens is that the first individual that finds a gap is being followed by those people that find it easier to follow something that's moving in roughly the right direction than it is to carve their own path through the crowd.
So emergence happens with all kinds of living things that move in groups.
It can be a crowd, it can be a flock of birds, a school of fish. These are all emergent phenomena when you're getting a large-scale order out of a small-scale interaction.
So you have a very brief introduction there to the concept of simple rules. Now, most of the rules that are being described here are innate. Geese don't get together and decide how they're going to fly. It's been programmed into them over countless, millennia of evolution. And even the phenomena you saw there with humans just kind of following each other in a line, the path of least resistance, nobody's doing that consciously. But one of the things that humans have the capacity for that many other animals don't is conscious reflection. And we can choose to use the idea of some very basic, simple rules to create the kind of complex relationships that we want. The kind of relationships that we long for, which are characterized by unity and love and compassion. Simple rules then become a conscious tool to create the kind of relationships that we want, or so we have found. Now, we're all familiar with that kind of simple rules. I mean, who hasn't noticed these kind of simple rules before? 10 simple rules in this case. We use consciously constructed simple rules when we drive on the 401. Maintain the speed limit, keep a safe distance, flash and signal when you're going to change lanes. Now, nobody follows these simple rules, but the rules are designed to create a safe and complex pattern. So we are familiar with that, but we found very early on that for the health and development of our relationship, that simple rules became a very powerful yet simple framework for us.
Yeah, actually, the reality is we're both OD dweebs, and so we decided to apply our work to our relationship. I think that's probably closer to the truth. It was actually really interesting when Scott first started taking a course in human systems dynamics, and it was pretty early on in our relationship. And then we ended up actually taking that certification together. But that he said, there's this idea that we could sit down together and craft what it is we want in our relationship and what it is we're trying to build. This had a lot of appeal because both as consultants, we had made what I think is a lot of money walking into situations where the rules had broken down and relationships had broken down. And it was of real interest to both of us to apply this to ourselves, to our own relationship. And I'll just voice my inner critic here that's going, seriously, if the people you've been with in the past saw you standing up here to talk about a relationship, I'd run out of the room screaming. So it was really important, personally, to having met Scott and seen what a great guy he was, to actually decide to intentionally create a kind of relationship. The other thing I knew from systems coaching, which is some of the coaching that I would do with groups, is that, and relationship coaching, which is another part of my professional background and training, is that often when people would enter into relationships, whether that's a relationship with a family, with a couple, with an organization, quite often in organizations, is that we enter in with a dream. And we have this sense of, here's what it's going to be like. So I get a call from the CBC and I think, fantastic, I'm going to go work at this amazing organization. And I have in my mind a picture, both conscious and unconscious, of what life will be like at the CBC. And then, of course, we get in to reality, and that dream is often broken. And it's in the breaking of the dream that then professionals come in to help do the repair work. And so part of sitting down together and crafting simple rules was actually being explicit and intentional about what was the dream that we wanted to create together in our relationship. And it was a really moving conversation. I remember we were sitting in Wellington in our very favorite restaurant where we ended up having our meal for our wedding, East and Main. And it was a beautiful night, and we sat at the corner table by the window, and we started to talk about what it was that we wanted to create together. And that evening, and then over the next few weeks, we crafted our simple rules. And I'm just going to put them up, but I'm not going to talk about them just yet. It's really easy when you're sitting at East and Main in Wellington on a beautiful fall night to talk about what it is you want to create in your relationship, because you're in love, things are new, things are exciting, everything is possible, and then real life happens. And so I'm going to ask you to think about, in the last 3 years, what are some of the real life things that have happened to you? And I bet if if we were to take time and write them down, you'd probably have a pretty long list of some pretty big things that had happened to you. So this morning, as I was brushing my teeth, getting ready, I don't know, it's always brushing teeth, this is stuff that occurs. I was thinking about what's happened to us in the last 3 years. So Scott and I met towards the end of my daughter's very serious illness. She was still ill early on in our relationship. Early in the new year, his eldest son started dealing with some extremely major life events and very substantial difficulties in his own life that had very serious ramifications for all of us. I moved in with Scott, so we started living together. Instead of being an independent woman living on my own, I was now a woman living with a brand new, partner and his adult son, who has different habits from what I'm used to, and a second adult son who would occasionally stay for a few weeks at a time. The following summer, my adult daughter and her boyfriend moved with us in our very small home in Wellington for several months. Then last year I decided that I wouldn't have my own consulting firm and have the freedom and the financial benefits of that, but I'd go work for the CBC, which I love, but does not pay all that well. Then we moved. We got married in there somewhere. Yes, a year, 4 months, and 3 weeks. Earlier this year, Scott actually is in the midst of a very significant career change and building a new business, which has had ramifications. And 5 weeks ago, I started an executive position at the CBC, which means that I now spend half the week in Montreal. So part of the week in Montreal, part of the week in Toronto, and part of the week in our home in Wellington. And as recently as yesterday, we sat in the car on the drive back to Toronto, sometimes in significant silence, let's put it that way, appreciating the irony that today we'd be talking about our relationship in front of a pile of people. And how sometimes, life interferes to go, well, you're going to be humble at the front of the room, aren't you? And so the simple rules then that we came up with, these 7 simple rules, are rules not designed for when life is going well, but in fact where they've been really helpful is when life has not been going well at all around us. Because we can't control the circumstances around us, but we can certainly pay attention to how we are and how we're working together and how we're talking together. And one of the phrases that stood out in the song that we just sang, which was open to giving what's hard to give. And sometimes it's really hard to give this stuff. But it's what we said we were committed to, and it's one of the rules that we live by. In fact, we believe in these rules so much that they were part of our wedding vows when we got married last June. So here's what they are. Speak honestly with courage and compassion. Now that sounds great, except when you're an introvert, and the last thing you want to do is open your mouth and talk to an extrovert who loves to talk. Or it's really hard when you're an extrovert and all you want to say is, for the love of God, say something and respond to me. Be kind, even when angry with each other. We use rule number 2 a lot, yesterday being a case in point. And even when you feel like you want to take a dull pencil and poke out your own eye or somebody else's, we do speak kindly. And it's been really, really, really helpful to remember that's what we committed to. And the circumstances change, but the kindness remains. And sometimes the kindest thing is actually not to talk. We talk and embrace with each other every day. What does that mean when we're living and working in different cities? It means that we take time for a Skype call every single day and texts every single day. And we tell each other we love each other every single day. And that really, really matters. And sometimes it's hard to do when life interferes. Grow our relationship, our individual selves, and our love for each other. That's really part of the commitment of, yes, Elizabeth, I support you taking a pay cut that will affect our lives and going back and working full time, which will affect our freedom and how we live our lives together and will affect your stress level. And I also support you taking a job that will take you to 2 different places. And I say, yes, Scott, I will support you and the insecurity that comes from building a brand new business. And I will rely on my faith and my belief and respect for you as you do that, even when it feels scary for both of us. Support our relationships with our children. When Scott's eldest son was in a living relationship and within about 2 days said he needed to move back home for some time, which was, I admit, really tough to do, to bring another adult into the house, it was a no-brainer to say yes. Of course, he's welcome. And then we talk about how we make that work. And when Taylor decided to bring her boyfriend Dylan for 4 months to a very tiny house in Wellington, it was yes, and we'll figure out how to make that work. Plan for and create regular bubbles to nurture our relationships. Sometimes a bubble's like last night where we just go to the theater together. We have a regular bubble every Wednesday. Both my teams, my old team that I'm just rolling out of and the new team know Wednesday night is date night. So if you're booking a flight for me, book it in time to get home for date night with Scott, because that's our weekly bubble. It really matters. And finally, open our homes as a loving place for friends and family. And sometimes that means we've left the keys for you by the barbecue. Go in and use the place. Or come because you need some space. Or just come for dinner. And those simple rules have been really, really helpful because they've helped us to navigate some really tough times. And they help us to navigate our life really joyfully. And it's pretty cool, I guess, as someone who works on this every single day in a very complex organization where we're working in the French culture and the English culture, 7 Inuit cultures as well, radio, television, digital, we're working through all this stuff. It's really, really wonderful to be able to say, yeah, the stuff that I'm teaching and that I'm leading and that, you know, we're working together on is something that we live every day. It really matters in terms of integrity to be able to do that. But I'm deeply grateful for the structure of our simple rules. And I don't actually mind being, you know, a bit of a dweeb when it comes to organizational development and applying it to our own relationship.
You'll notice that with our rules, 2 things about our rules. Each of them begins with a verb. These are actions. They are not intentions. They are actions that we commit to, and that is one of the key principles of creating simple rules. The kind of relationship that we were seeking to develop comes out of, not out of intention alone, it comes out of choosing to act in certain ways, and that's a key part of developing simple rules. The other thing that is true about these is that these are our simple rules. You would probably write different rules for your personal relationships, for this congregation, and how this congregation wants to act together. And I do throw that out as something perhaps to consider. One of the themes that I hear whenever I am at West Hill is about being in right relationship with each other, with yourself, with each other, and with the planet. How do you do that? Simple rules are what provide coherence in any relationship, any system, but they also maximize freedom. We don't sit down and we spell out all the details of how we're going to act together. We create a broad framework of simple rules that guide our decisions day to day and that create and move us towards the kind of relationship that we're seeking as long as we act out those simple rules. Geese and fish and ants don't really have a choice but to follow those rules. They are programmed into their system. Humans and these kinds of simple rules have to make the choice, and that's where the struggle always comes, is when you're really angry at each other, our rule kicks in, be kind. And that's been a huge plus and a huge difference from my first marriage, I must say. And it creates the kind of context where we can create the kind of relationship that we are seeking. Now, this can be applied not just in the personal level, but as I've been saying, at an organizational level. And in our work, we have found it a very powerful tool for creating high-functioning teams, high-functioning organizations. In fact, I'm currently working with a nonprofit in Durham region that works with homeless men. And we've been going through a process over the last 1.5 years of revisiting what their mission is. Elizabeth referred to this as the dream. What are they there to do, and what's their vision for how they're going to accomplish that? What are the values that are going to guide them? Well, this is what they came up with last year. Because of my eyesight, I'll come up here to read it. We partner with those on the path from homelessness to home by providing personalized support, safe, affordable housing, stability, and hope. So that took a long time. It took close to a year for the organization to come up with that mission statement. It started with the senior leadership team, then it went down to the entire management team, and then went to the entire staff of about 80 people through a process of coming up together with what are we about as an organization? What are we actually trying to do? The next step we're now taking is, so how are you going to do that? And we've been using the concept of simple rules, again, to start the process of talking together as an organization. How do we need to behave? How do we choose to act in a way that allows us to accomplish that mission? Now, they're very early in this process, but this is what they have come up with for the time being as we begin this with them. Learn from every interaction. Not sure what it is about my remote. There we go. Take the initiative to solve problems and seize opportunities. Act as partners in the mission with everyone in the organization. Share information whenever possible for the benefit of others, which does not mean gossip. Implement policies and procedures with kindness and compassion. One of the challenges that they have, of course, is they're working sometimes with men who have severe addictions, mental challenges, who simply sometimes lack the life skills to be able to live in community, and there are times when they have to have people leave. So this principle guides them, but I made the point, it also guides the management team when they are implementing policies and procedures with their staff as well. And finally, affirm and support success, no matter how small. Now stop and think about what would happen with this organization if everybody, every day, is committed to that and does it. It is their context. And it is their way of saying, here's how we behave together. They run a wide diversity of different programs in different locations throughout Durham. So how do they create unity of purpose and vision and mission? They're doing it through simple rules. It works at the individual level, or at least it is working for us. It works at the team level, and it can work at the organizational level. And it's a tool that we offer to you as a way of thinking about how do we actually create the kind of relationships we want? How do we live the dream? Thank you.